When I was younger, my relatives and extended family would always come down to my house every Christmas to celebrate Christmas Eve with my family. The night before, we would have a large Christmas dinner with the whole family. Then most of my family would stay over for the night to open presents with us in the morning. We lived in a very large country house at the time, so having enough beds for everyone was not an issue. For most of the day leading up to the Christmas dinner, the adults would pretty much let me and my siblings and my other cousins do whatever we wanted. Most of my cousins were around my age or younger, so we got along well. We would play together in the snow outside and attempt at building snowmen and such. It's worth mentioning now that we had a very vast property, with the nearest neighbors probably being 10 miles or so away. Anyways, around 6 p.m., once it had gotten dark out, we were all gathered around the large, fancy dining room table we use on special occasions, having a Christmas dinner with turkey, potatoes, ham, squash, green beans, pie, and other food. Me and my small cousin Chase were the first to finish our food, and a family rule we had was that no one could start eating dessert until everyone else had finished their food, so to pass the time we went downstairs to play on my Xbox. While going down the stairs facing the large windows against the front door, I could clearly make out an odd sight. There was a car outside the house, just stopped directly on the road that runs past our house with its headlights on. I didn't think it was someone from my family's car, so I decided to step outside with my cousin and see who it was. I threw on my large coat and boots and opened the front door to a blast of freezing cold air and falling snow so thick I could barely see through it. The weird thing was, as soon as I walked off the porch and began trudging through the snow towards the car, I heard its engine start and begin driving off slowly down the snowy road until it disappeared into the darkness. Honestly, I didn't think of it as anything sinister at the time. I just went back in, hung my coat up, and continued to play on the Xbox with Chase. That night, I would be sleeping in my room with Chase and my other cousin Manny, who was the oldest of our cousins at 18. A very strong and large guy you really wouldn't want to mess with. Anyways, I remember being woken up at some off hour of the night to a car engine outside. I sat up and glanced out the window, and I could see a car stopped in the middle of the road in front of our house with its headlights on. The light was flooding through our window, and it also woke Manny and Chase up, because a second later, Manny said he was going downstairs to see who it was. I was 15, and being the second oldest in the room, I said I'd go with him, but made Chase stay in the room since he was only 12. Me and Manny put our coats on downstairs and started making our way through the snow towards the car. There was even more snow then than there was earlier, and it was borderline about to be a blizzard out there, I could tell. This time the car didn't speed away before we could get to it. We were able to walk right up to it. It was a gray 2006 Toyota Corolla with the battery and headlights still on, but it was in park, and both the passenger and driver doors were wide open with the key in the ignition. There was no one around though. We stood there for a second in the cold, kind of just confused as to why this abandoned car was out here. Manny leaned in the passenger side door and took a look around the car, when just then suddenly cried out in pain and fell to the ground. I ran over to him, just in time to see two dark figures crawling out from underneath the car. I pulled Manny to his feet and started dragging him back towards the house. I heard unintelligible shouting behind me and began hearing footsteps in the snow sprinting fast towards us. Manny broke off of me and we ran as fast as we could back into the house, locking the front door. As we were standing there catching our breath, outside I could see the car start driving off down the road at what looked like 60 miles per hour. Manny had been stabbed with a knife just above his ankle really badly. He was bleeding all over the place, and soon enough the whole family was awake and in a complete panic as my mom phoned the police department. 2 cop cars arrived on the property as we were treating Manny's injury. The thing about it was, me and Manny were the only one who could provide solid details on the crime. Other than that it was a gray 2006 Toyota Corolla, there wasn't really much else we could say. It had been way too dark for me to make out whoever was under the car, and Manny hadn't even seen them at all. The cops left soon after, and there was really nothing else for everyone to do other than force themselves to try and go back to sleep. I'm sure no one slept a wink for the rest of the night, however. The rest of our family left almost instantly the following morning. The whole thing had kind of ruined the holiday, and nobody really wanted to stick around after that. I couldn't really blame them though. I don't know who those guys were or what they wanted, but fortunately for the rest of the time I lived in that house, as far as I could tell, they never came back. During winter break 2 years ago, I got this pretty decent gig at my local library, sitting in a children's area and reading Christmas stories to different groups of kids that came into the library. I had mostly been sitting at home during the days leading up to Christmas, so it was a good opportunity for me to get outside and make some money. The library was also close enough to my house for me to ride my bike there every day. Fast forward to Christmas Eve. I was working late from 5 until the library closed at 7 p.m., so I could still go home and spend time with my family afterwards. It was like 20 minutes before closing, and I was reading to my last group of kids for the night in the children's section of the library. As I was reading the story to all of them, I noticed this one kid sitting in the back of the room. He stood out because of just how weird he looked. He seemed around 10, a bit old to be participating in the reading. He was ghostly pale with long, messy hair, and wearing dirty overalls, and he had noticeable bags under his eyes. He was also kind of death-staring me the entire time. I tried not to pay it too much mind. I figured he just came from a poor family and was socially awkward or something. It was just the weird looks he kept giving me. Most of the kids were either really captivated by the story or looking elsewhere if they were losing attention, but he just kept staring at me with these really wide eyes that were boring a hole straight through me. Anyways, after I finished the story, it was 10 minutes before closing. All the kids and most other people who were in the library were clearing out, so I decided to sneak off to the break room down the hall to avoid having to tell another story. I could just hang out there until the library closed, go home, and get my paycheck. I put the book back on the shelf and walked down the hallway that was sort of hidden behind some shelves in the kids' area, past the bathrooms, and into the break room at the end of the hall. I sat down at one of the tables in the break room, which was just a small room with a few tables, a countertop with a coffee maker, and 2 vending machines. There was no one else in there. The wall to my right was entirely made of glass and gave a view out into the pathway that ran through the parking lot towards the entrance of the library. It was raining hard out there because in California during Christmas time we don't get snow, we get rain, and it kind of sucks, to say the least. I got myself a soda from the vending machine and just started texting people and then watching YouTube on my phone, waiting for the library to close. Over the crashing rain, I heard the sound of a light knocking on the break room door. I set down my phone and got up to open the door, assuming it to be one of the library employees about to scold me for slacking off. However, I was caught off guard to see that one creepy kid from the reading session at the door. I asked him what he needed, and in response he just started giving me this creepy-ass laugh. I shit you not, this might sound stupid, but I was admittedly getting the chills listening to this kid laugh. It sounded like he was choking almost. Then he just turned around and took off down the hall and out of sight. I stood there for a few seconds in the doorway, just trying to process what the hell just happened, when one of the librarians came on the intercom announcing that the library was closing. I grabbed my phone, tossed out the soda, and left the library, still thinking about that kid. I pulled my hood up as I entered the rain, groaning to myself about having to ride my bike home in the rain. I unlocked my bike from the bike rack and started getting on it when I spotted that kid again from earlier. He was approaching me from the parking lot, just walking straight towards me through the rain. As he got closer, I noticed he was crying and completely drenched with water. I led him under the awning so he could dry off and asked him what was wrong. He started babbling something about his dad being in trouble. He asked me for help and I agreed, and he started leading me through the parking lot to where he said his dad was. In hindsight, I should have just brought him into the library and had one of the librarians deal with him. I don't know why that didn't occur to me at the moment. He brought me all the way to the corner of the parking lot to some beat-up gray van. He slid open the backseat door and jumped inside, then slid over to the next seat and started beckoning for me to come inside. I leaned forward and craned my neck to get a better look inside the van, when I noticed something. Through the darkness of the van, I could barely make out something in the passenger seat of the van, right next to the beckoning kid. It was some guy in a ski mask, looking like he was crouched down in a position ready to pounce. I instantly turned and sprinted back towards the library, and the van sped off shortly after. As it pulled out of the parking lot, I noticed the license plate was covered in duct tape. I didn't bother to tell anyone. I was too tired and just aching to go home. I got on my bike, rode home in the rain, and went to bed. It was early Christmas morning 2 years ago. Just after midnight, I believe. My wife and 2 kids were fast asleep, and I had just finished putting presents under the tree and making other preparations for the next morning. I didn't feel like going to sleep just yet, so I sat down on the living room couch with the fireplace going while watching a movie. There was a loud snowstorm raging outside, which also made me feel even more cozy inside. After the movie finished, I think it was closer to 2 a.m. at this point, I shut off the TV and started heading upstairs to go to bed. Now our living room is in the back of the house, and to get to the stairs you have to pass through a hallway that connects the living room to the foyer, and on the left side of the hallway is the basement door. As I was passing by the basement door, I began to hear concerning sounds from inside that made me stop and listen for a minute. From inside the basement, I was hearing these scratching and rustling sounds. Our household has had problems with rodents before, so automatically that's what I assumed it was. A bunch of rodents that had been living inside the basement. I just thought we had cleared them all out months ago, but I still didn't really think twice about the sounds being anything other than rodents. I figured I'd go down to the basement and move the rat traps around. So I opened the door and started walking down the old stairs. The light switch is at the bottom of the stairs, of course, so as I was walking down in complete darkness, basically. When I got to the bottom step and started groping around for the light switch, I heard some pretty disturbing sounds that made me stop dead in my tracks. There was the sound of cardboard boxes being shuffled around and scraping on the concrete floor. Definitely too loud and being moved too forcefully to be made by some sort of animal. Then my worst fears were confirmed when I heard the horrifying sound of an older man's low chuckle emitting from the darkness in front of me. Instantly, I ran for it back up the stairs and out of the basement, shutting and locking the door. I grabbed my phone off the counter and dialed 911 and explained the situation. Then I ran upstairs to wake up my wife and explain the situation to her. While we were upstairs, I began to hear banging on the basement door downstairs, so loud and deafening soon enough both my kids were awake and afraid as well. We all locked ourselves in the guest bedroom as we continued hearing banging downstairs and the sound of some insane-sounding guys screaming. The basement door was very old, and I finally heard the sound I'd been dreading, which was of the door breaking down. We then heard loud footsteps stomping out into the foyer, then the front door opening, and nothing after that. We didn't leave the guest room until we heard police sirens coming down the street like 20 minutes later. The police did a full sweep of the house top to bottom and determined that whoever had been in the basement was gone, and had left through the front door, which was left open. They also found he had entered through the basement with a ground level window that had been smashed open. Most unsettling, they found a sleeping bag and multiple knives in the basement, with the names of me, my wife, and 2 children carved into the wall. They never found out who it was, but after that, I got a lot more paranoid being in my house alone.